Hey, my name is Vivek Pandey and I serve here at Simpl as the Vice President of Engineering. Oh, there are so many things that I love about being engineer, and I think many engineers share my thought, and that is the following. We human beings have an inner urge to create things. So musicians create music, painters create painting, poets create poetry, and I as an engineer create software systems, which is far more abstract than these things, but it's something there. And so doing engineering helped me satisfy this urge to create things, and at the same time we engineers, I in particular, create things which are useful for people in general. So on one hand I get the satisfaction of creating something, and on the other hand this something which I can create is very, very useful. So that's what I love about my job. Any non-trivial technology takes quite a long time to build, and it needs a lot of people to contribute to this effort in order to be able to build it. So the challenge is, firstly, how we can bring competent people together so that they can work on this building of this new technology. And then at the same time, while we have a long-term vision, 1 year, 2 year out in the future, but we want to be able to divide our overall work in milestones, so that every day, every week we can make progress and we can measure our progress. So we can get some short-term benefits, tactical benefits out of the project, out of the work that we are doing. So the challenge is, how do we divide that long-term goal into short-term steps and proceed towards our goal. Well, firstly, I know our CTO Puneet Singh from a long time, from more than 15 years now. So around 2.5 years ago or something, Nitya and Puneet reached out to me and asked me to consider joining Simpl. And at that time, Simpl was not as big as it is today. And I was like, yeah, interesting company, but probably due to its smaller scale, they don't have as many interesting problems to solve. And so I went to work elsewhere, in fact at Google. And around 6 months ago, Puneet again reached out to me. He's a good friend, and said to me, hey Vivek, we are much bigger now. We have really some pressing problems to solve here. Why don't you consider again? And then I thought, well, Puneet is here, and Nitya also I have now known for more than 2 years, and I thought that let's give it a chance, and it has been a good journey so far. So Google is in some sense the company of our times. It's the most well-known software company in the world, and working there was full of learnings for me, and some of those learnings I try to transfer to Simpl. One of those learnings is that, hey, we build systems. So what is a good process around how to write the code, then you test the code, you deploy the code, and then you test the code, you get the peer reviews from the code, and once that is done, you check it in, you deploy the code, and then finally you monitor the systems that you have just built. So what should this software development cycle look like? So Google has its own practices around this process, and some of those I try to inculcate and bring it to Simpl. Another thing is, Google is a massively distributed company. It has thousands, I don't know, at least hundreds of offices around the world which work all together. So how do you communicate to each other? There is a very strong emphasis in Google at writing documents. So, and many times somehow engineers are averse to writing documents. They just want to write code. But Google is a very document centric company, and I can see that it is very, very important, even though engineers find it not so pleasant activity, because Google is a very distributed company. You just can't write code, otherwise nobody knows what you have done, and many people need to know. Many people need to know now. Many people who will see your code 3 years from now need to know what you were thinking when you wrote something. So this document centricity, I want to increase, I want to tend towards being more document centric here at Simpl, so that we know what was done, why something was done, whenever it was done, and why, and so on. Yeah, these are some of the learnings that I am trying to bring from Google. Simpl is solving many hard problems, and solutions to some of those problems would indeed lead to patents. For instance, we as a fintech company are, like many other fintech companies, subject to fraud, subject to organized fraud or attempts of fraud by very determined set of fraudsters. So we need to be able to find out which transactions are attempts frauds, and we want to do that. We want to be able to do that in real time before we allow the transaction to happen. So some of these are very interesting and challenging problems whose solutions should lead to multiple patents. Let's see what list I can come up with. Firstly, you need to have tech skills, hard tech skills. You need to be able to write code in the languages that we work on. You need to be good with systems design. You need to be a logically oriented computer scientist. So that is the basic, really. Everybody needs that. Secondly, you need to have a good attitude. So there are two kinds of engineers. One kind of engineer is that, hey, I'll do what you ask me to do. Okay, so that's useful, but more useful is I'll do what you ask me to do, but then I'll figure out what should be done, and then I will make suggestions that we should do this thing and discuss that and then do that. So that go-getter kind of attitude is what is immensely valuable to me. And the third thing is that you need to have good communication skills. So good communication skills, this requirement was always there. You need to be able to talk about what you are doing, but particularly in these times where half of our team is remote and everybody is working from their homes, this communication skill becomes even more important. Now you are not sitting next to somebody, you need to, over the video or over the documents, you need to convey what you are doing. So communication skill as an importance in the whole skill package gains more importance because of the times that we are in. Yeah, these are some of the skills that I look for in my engineers. Okay, let's see how we can put it. I divide my professional journey in two parts, say Act 1 and Act 2. And Act 1 lasted from when I graduated from my master's, which is in 2005, to roughly 2018-ish. And Act 2 is 2018 onwards. So first let me take you through Act 1, and that will set the stage for Act 2 where I am today. Act 1 was mostly around my dream to found a successful startup. Okay, so when I went to my first job, which was in VMware in Palo Alto, California, And you know, California is the hub of startups. So I was in the midst I was in Silicon Valley, where there were startups all around. And VMware was, well, it was a public company, but pretty agile and very innovative company. So that is where the startup dream started. And I, being a very technically oriented person than a business oriented person, it's difficult for me to come up with ideas that will sell. I can code up things, but I find it difficult to sell things. But in any case, I made several attempts of running a startup, of finding and running a startup, initially in the Silicon Valley, and then over time I moved back to India. And it's not that I was doing startups always. Sometimes I was working in a startup, trying to learn how to do these things. Sometimes I went to the business school. But finally, from 2014 to 2018, I did find a successful startup. So I founded QGraph along with a co-founder of mine, and we ran it successfully, and we had a reasonable exit. So that journey, Act 1, ended in 2018, and then I thought, hey Vivek, do you want to run another startup? And I was like, no, not for now. It's too much of hard work and too much of hard burns and too much of up and down. And I have lived this dream for so long. For now what I want to do is, I have had so many learnings. Now I want to work for somebody. I don't want to run a startup. I want to work in a company. So I initially worked at Google, where I had lots of learnings, and then and now for quite some time now I am working at Simpl. So now my goal is that I have had a bunch of learning from both from trying to find startup and running those startups, plus also seeing how big companies like Google work. So now my aim is, how can I employ all this learning to the success of Simpl. Okay. Another thing that you asked us about, the journey from software engineer to a leader in the field of software engineering, and that transition happened somewhere during the time I was running my own startup. Initially I was the only engineer, but then over time we hired more and more people, and then I became like a leader in the software field, in the software engineering. And I see the job of a software engineer, the task of a software engineer is to build some component in a very proficient and a thorough manner. You build some software systems which shouldn't crash, which should be correct, and which should scale with time, and you try to evolve the architecture over time. This is what you do as a software engineer. And as a leader in software engineering, I see my role as twofold. The first thing is that I need to align our software, our technology team efforts with the business goals that we are having. So I need to be aware of what we want to achieve as a business, and then translate that to concrete projects, teams, their organizations that can be then implemented. So that is one thing, translating business vision to technology teams and projects. And another thing that I need to do is, now I know what I want to do technically, but then I need to hire people, I need to build teams. And you might be knowing, in today's market, hiring talent is scarce and very demanding. So we need to hire good people. We need to assign these people the projects, so that on one hand our projects get completed, on other hand people, the engineers, work on things that are in line with their intrinsic interests. So that sort of alignment is one of my jobs. And then another task of a tech leader is to grow leaders below him. So a fresh engineer joins us, but then we want those engineers to over time take more and more responsibilities. Maybe they become leaders at some time as they mature in the organization. So yeah, so bringing up new leaders so that my work is reduced and less stressful is another work of mine. Yeah, these are some things I think which leaders in our field do. All right, let's see. I think first of all, you need a solid technical background. So you need to study hard, study your lessons. You ultimately, even when you are a leader, you are not coding computer science, you are not coding on the day-to-day basis, but you need to have a very good sense of what's going on. So initially, in your initial years, you always need to pay a lot of attention to your work. Study computer science, take online courses. If you are in college, study hard in college, do all the assignments, etc. Then when you switch to your job, well, the first thing is whatever task is assigned to you, that should be done in a timely and thorough manner. And then slowly you should start expanding your horizon and expanding your scope. So your manager says do this, so you do that, but then since you are the person who is working on the ground, you would know more than your manager, because your manager is managing so many people and he is also a human being. So you should then start making suggestions that hey, we are doing X, but we should also do Y and Z, and that will be beneficial for our company. So that way, okay, so this is one thing, you try to expand the area in which you are working. And one quality that you should be having to be successful in this field is to be curious. So you should be curious about all the things that are happening around you. What projects other people are working on, why is their project important, so expanding technically. And also try to be curious around the business. What are the key metrics in our business? How are those metrics moving over time? How is my work and other people's works impacting those metrics? So be more curious. So once you do that, then over time you will grow in one of the two directions. Direction one is be more tech focused and be deeply involved in solving some of the hardest problems, some of the hardest technical problems that our company needs solved. So then that way you become more technically aligned, you rise in the technical ladder, you become a more and more proficient engineers, and you guide a team of engineers to accomplish hard tasks. And the other direction that you can take is more managerial type of path, which is where you manage a set of people, you manage stakeholder expectations, you figure out what needs to be done, distribute the tasks in to your team. So the problem themselves need not be very complex, but there are a lot of things to be done and to be tracked, and that's what the managers do. So yeah, so my in short, my advice would be be very thorough in what you are doing and try to be curious and expand your scope over time. Let's take a historical perspective on the evolution of technology companies in India. So long ago, that is in 70s and 80s, there were the technology companies in India were the services companies like Infosys and Wipro and so on. And these companies they are big companies even now. And what do? They do software developments for their clients who are sitting in US or Europe. And the idea is that hey, those companies need some software to be developed, and the salaries are lower in India compared to US and Europe. So it is possible for the software development to happen here, and that saves cost for the US companies. So that is first of the three eras. The second era started happening in mid 90s to mid 2000s, and that also continues till today, and that is US software development companies opening up their product development centers here in India, in Bangalore and Delhi and Hyderabad and etc. and Pune and so on. So for instance, you have Microsoft India, you have Google India, you have VMware India, you have Intel India, most of the big companies have their Indian offices. And what do these offices do? These offices also build software for their companies, but for most of these companies like let's say Google and Microsoft, most of the business is in US or Europe. So ultimately you are building for US or Europe, although you are the part of the same company, it's not some software outsourcing. But somewhere in mid 2000s, I mean 2005 and so on, a third trend started, which is that our per capita GDP of our country has kept on rising, and somewhere that time it exceeded the threshold such that people had enough disposable incomes to buy stuff, various sort of stuff. We are getting richer over time, and that allowed tech companies to flourish which were building for India. So their market was not in US or Europe, their market was in India. So we have very successful companies like, let's say, Zomato or Swiggy or Flipkart and so on, and Simpl is an example of that, which builds in India and it builds for India, and that's economically feasible because hey, India is not as poor as it was earlier. And so there is opportunity because Indians have buying power. And second thing is that our youngsters, a lot of them are very solidly grounded in maths and programming. So on the one hand you have opportunity, and on the other hand you have the talent to tap that opportunity. And so what I see is that at least in the foreseeable future, I see more and more technological innovation and startups to come out of India, because India growth story will continue, people will continue to have more and more disposable incomes, and therefore more and more companies should come up to be able to make business out of that. Thank you so much for asking these questions.